Hello, welcome to Natemare Flix. I am Nate. You are you, and as I record this video, it is June 4th, 2022, which is the 40th anniversary of Poltergeist. Now, Poltergeist is a landmark classic horror film that is often imitated, seldom replicated, wonderful, important film that is just so goddamn effective that while thinking about all my favorite booga booga shit, I was like, you know what? Poltergeist might be the very best ghost film of all time. And so I thought of all the other contenders that could vie for the crown of best ghost film of all time. And then I made a top 10 list, y'all. And I want you to do the same because I may have missed some things and I might need some recommendations. So go down in the comment section after you've watched this video. Let me know what your top 10 ghost films are and let me know what movies I need to check out. What doesn't belong on such an important list. But here you go. This is how I see things. These are my top 10 ghost horror films of all time. Number 10, this movie had to scrap, fight, and claw just to make the list. It just barely made the cut, but at the end of the day, 13 Ghosts is just way too undeniably charming and campy and nostalgic for a 90s kid like myself. Now, this movie was a remake of a Vincent Price film, and I kind of wish we would do some more of that. They tried it in the early 2000s with films like 13 Ghosts and House of Wax, and they didn't really have the reception that they were looking for, I suppose, but I really think we should retry this because Vincent Price obviously means so much to horror, and I think we need to educate a younger generation on Vincent Price and make those movies relevant again. But also, those movies were so great and so macabre, and we could do some nice modern things with those movies and with reimagining those. I think you can see that with something like 13 Ghosts. And yes, this film is already so dated, and you look at things like the special effects and the CGI of that time, and it's bad, y'all, but it does add to the charm because this is a movie that kind of knows what it is. It is a little bit self-aware. It knows that it's goofy and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and they cast Matthew Lillard, that's perfect cast. That's who you put in a movie like that. So if you're going to do a list of top 10 ghost movies and you want to go for quality, you also kind of want to go for quantity, and we have that here. This movie is called 13 Ghosts, which means we have like at least 5 ghosts in this movie. And you want to shout out my top 3 ghosts in the movie, the one you need to look for. If you haven't seen this film, then I implore you to go check this out and to look forward to seeing ghosts like the Jackal and the Juggernaut and the Angry Princess, because I think they will wow you and astound you, and they will prove memorable for you in the end. Number 9 is a classic Carpenter film, The Fog. There's a lot going for The Fog, and there is right from the jump because it does a couple things that I love in my ghost films. That is, we talk about the sins of the father, some unfinished business for some tortured souls. You get that because this is all about a small, remote town celebrating its inception. But really, it was founded on tragedy, and there's a lot of malady in its past, and its roots, they're not as glorious as they're made out to be. It's kind of like, imagine if you were trying to do your 4th of July jamboree and all of a sudden a Civil War soldier popped up in your face, or a slave trader, or maybe somebody who went out and settled the West and murdered a whole bunch of Native Americans. All of a sudden you were confronted with that. It would kind of take the ritz and glamour off of your holiday. This movie does that type of thing. It also opens with an older fellow passing down a ghost story around a campfire, which is just a classic, wonderful setup. How many times growing up did you gather around friends at a bonfire or on a camping trip, or maybe while just doing s'mores? You grab the flashlight, maybe in a dark room under a blanket, and you tell a ghost story and try to unwit and unnerve one another. This movie does that, and then it explores the conceit of that ghost story. I love that setup so much. And then, of course, you have that John Carpenter score coming in that just has this palpable, malevolent energy that is waxing with the fog, this evil fog that contains these spirits, these apparitions that come in like a little silhouette of these people that had leprosy. There's so much going on in this movie, and a lot of people will talk to you about the inclusion of Jamie Lee Curtis, but she doesn't really have much to do. The true star of this production is Adrienne Barbeau, and what she does up there in that lighthouse as this radio personality, she is an unheralded horror character. And I think we need to give her more love because that is a fantastic character and she is intoxicating in the role. There's so much going on with The Fog and you need to check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Number 8 is The Others, which is essentially a more up-to-date rendition of The Innocents. And this movie has Nicole Kidman in the starring role. And Nicole Kidman is obviously an A-list powerhouse type talent, and she gives a wonderful performance in this film. This is a film that is based off The Turning of the Screw, and we've gotten so many of those recently. We even had a Mike Flanagan production on Netflix, which of course was great. I'm a Mike Flanagan fanboy, but all that being said, if you want to look at adaptations of The Turning of the Screw, at least ones we've gotten in the last 30, 40 years, I would say The Others is the penultimate rendition or adaptation of that story. And then they invoke some new stuff with this story that you may not have seen coming. There's some great twists. And ultimately, the biggest success of this movie is that it proves that at the end of the day, a moody, atmospheric, gothic ghost story is timeless and powerful, and audiences will always be here for that type of thing. Number 7 is Sleepy Hollow. Now, as a kid, I loved the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman, a story that was actually one of the very first to be published in the New Founded Americas, which is just a fun little factoid for you. So I love that story as a kid. So when I found out that there was a movie, and then that movie was made by the guy that made Batman, and that Captain Jack Sparrow was playing Ichabod Crane, I was like, what? I gotta see that. I saw it. I loved it. I still love it. I'm going to keep on loving it. If you are somebody who's into aesthetic and imagery and set design and costumes and period pieces, you like gothic horror, you like Tim Burton, then I suggest that you check out Sleepy Hollow. For me, this is Tim Burton at the peak of his powers. This is his film that I probably most enjoy above all else, which of course is saying a lot. And then you have Johnny Depp as Ichabod Crane. Of course, Johnny Depp is a wonderful character actor. He is a delight, and he does delight as Ichabod Crane. And you put him up against this antagonist, this menacing, imposing headless horseman, and then you cast that role ingeniously with Christopher Walken. Yeah, you got yourself a damn fine film. Number 6 is The Ring, the American remake of Ringu. What do I gotta say besides 7 days? I mean, you hear that, you instantly know that it is this movie. You instantly get a little feeling in your stomach. You become unsettled. You don't feel comfortable. And 7 days, it feels like your fate is just barreling down upon you. And that's why this movie ultimately ends up with this sort of nihilistic ethical dilemma of how would you try to evade this horror antagonist, this ghost of Samara. Because if somebody you loved watched this tape, what more can you really do at the end of the day than to get others to watch the tape and to spread this thing widely so hopefully Samara comes for others and prolongs the life of your loved one? That is horrific. That is a terrible proposition, but that's the type of thing that you got to be into if you're into horror. And then if Samara, of course, asserts herself as a modern horror icon, just the look of this character is terrifying, is horrifying, so much so that my younger brother, when he was a kid, he couldn't watch The Ring, but he couldn't even stomach Scary Movie 3, in which they kind of parody The Ring. Even in that film, seeing this wet little girl come crawling out of a TV screen was too much for him and would send him running down the hall to jump into his bed and get under his covers, trying to find some sort of refuge and safety. Samara is terrifying. The tapes are iconic and memorable, and something stands out about them to pretty much everybody. It seems like some sort of crazy ass, gnarly, demented student film, but Igor Verbinski really did a great job of crafting this film and adapting it from its predecessor, its Japanese counterpart. And I haven't seen that film, but everybody I've ever heard talk about the two films say that this film is the superior version, and I have to believe it because look at how highly it places on this list. Number 5 is Ghostbusters. Yes, I know this is about horror. It might be balking right now. I'm like, that's not a horror movie. But let me explain. When I was a little kid, I did love this movie. And yes, I thought it very funny. I thought it a comedy too. But it did kind of prove as a litmus test as was I ready for more? Could I handle more horror? And so I think if you have a kid or somebody who's young and you want to start exposing them to horror and seeing what they are ready for, I think Ghostbusters is a nice film to show them, because we do get ghosts of every shape and size and doing everything. We got slimy ghosts, we have old lady ghosts, we have cab driver ghosts, we have really freaking scary ghosts at times, we got devilish dogs, we got people doing everything, including giving Dan Aykroyd a blowy. So Ghostbusters is giving you all the ghostly goodness you could handle, and it will prove to you if your youngin' is ready for some more scares, or if maybe you just need to keep them on the Scooby-Doo diet for a little bit longer. But then let's just talk about the merits of this movie. Few movies are more quotable than Ghostbusters. You want to talk about iconic moments? The movie's just chock full of it, and this ensemble is incredible. I love the way all these players bounce off of each other. And of course, you get that with the Ghostbusters. But we got to talk about the chemistry of Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver. I don't think enough people talk about the movie magic that occurs every time those two are on screen together. You think of Sigourney Weaver and you're like, yeah, I know she can handle her own. She's got dramatic chops. And I know that she can do some badass shiznit. But you may not understand just how naturally funny she is, and she can hold her own in a scene with the quick-tongued, dry wit of Bill Murray. And Bill Murray, of course, is the greatest thing in this film, at least to me. And at the end of the day, I love the movie as a kid. I love the movie as an adult. Every time I watch the movie, I just find more charm in it. I just find myself walking away with more of an appreciation for the film. The love of this film has spanned generations, and it has brought generations together. And what more could you say about a movie like Ghostbusters? Number 4 is Candyman. Now, I think a lot of people forget that Candyman is kind of a ghost story. I think we kind of default to thinking of him as a slasher, but he's so much more than that. And Bernard Rose did such a wonderful job as a director and the screenwriter for this film, and the way that he adapted Clive Barker, which is not an easy thing to do, because Clive Barker is a horror genius who can get a bit ponderous, and he can probe deep into the human psyche, and he will explore all sorts of complicated thematics. I mean, we're talking about stuff with race, with socioeconomics, we're talking about stuff with just love. He gets into all of it, and then you see all of it play out in this film. It is one of the most written about horror films. Tony Todd, who plays the Candyman, of course, who is Daniel Robitaille, talks about people always coming up to him and talking about how they wrote their dissertations on this film and what this film means to them. Candyman is just steeped in so much lore. There's so much intrigue with this character and his origins, his history. I love Michael, Freddy, Jason, Chucky, Leatherface, so on and so forth. But none of them have as much going on with them as Daniel Robitaille, as the Candyman. And I really think that the movie we got last year, a follow-up, it just did all the more for the reputation, for the impact, for the legacy of Daniel Robitaille. You look at that original film, you look at Tony Todd, you hear that voice, you see him floating, you see him cutting people from groin to throat with that hook, and then you see Virginia Madsen playing off of him and the way that they have this complicated relationship and he's trying to seduce her. There's so much going on in that original 90s film. And I know it's praised, but I just don't think it's praised enough. Candyman, that might be a masterpiece. Number 3 is The Sixth Sense. And look, when Bruce Willis was dead at the end of The Sixth Sense, I jizzed in my pants. The movie's famous for that. And it really put M. Night Shyamalan on a career trajectory of having to be the twist guy. What a twist! That is M. Night Shyamalan, and it has to do with this movie and the way that it just shook people up, and it was a cultural phenomenon, and it went gangbusters at the box office because of the word of mouth around this film. And unfortunately, I think that now it's so known for that twist and for the fact that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. Oh, spoiler alert, that people have become a little cynical and they maybe don't see this movie for all that it is. This is a beautiful, wonderful story. And you have wonderful bits of acting. You have a Bruce Willis who isn't just phoning it in. He hasn't completely given up yet in his career. You have one of the best child acting performances of all time, coming compliments of Haley Joel Osment. And then you even have an underrated performance by somebody like Toni Collette, who of course now gets all the lauding, all the heralding, but this is a role that she should receive more acclaim and attention for. Just a wonderful script. There's a lot going on with symbolism in this film, and that if you don't think it's a horror movie, Well then, got like 3 points for you here. You don't think this is a horror movie? I don't know about you, but I'd be a bit horrified if I came home to find a trembling, sweaty, in his tighty whities, anorexic Donnie Wahlberg waving a gun in my face. If I was minding my own business and all of a sudden the ghost of a little girl came up and started throwing up in my face, I think I would be a little bit scared, a little bit shook up. And if I were to find out that for as long as I can remember, that I wasn't alive, that I was a ghost, I had unfinished business here on earth and all my loved ones could not hear me, that I was stuck in some sort of limbo, yeah, that would be troubling. That would be terrifying. Horror doesn't have to always be about blood and guts and viscera and gore being thrown in your face. Sometimes it's a little bit more subtle. Sometimes it's a bit more psychological. Horror can just be about what's up here, not necessarily what's in here being ripped out and shown to you. And that's part of why The Sixth Sense is so wonderful. Okay, number 2, our silver medal recipient. It's the film we are here celebrating today. It is Poltergeist. So yes, I left the video with my, is this the greatest ghost movie of all time? Maybe for some, but for me, it's going to have to be the runner-up here today. I love this film. It's undeniable. It is a tour de force. That Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg collab, yeah, it's paid dividends for 40 years now. The sheer amount of iconic moments generated within the runtime of Poltergeist is vertically, like, it's almost unmatched. Just think about off the top of your head how many quintessential horror movie moments are in Poltergeist. I mean, you have the stuff with the clown, you have the tree, you have the never-ending hallway sequence, you have the dead bodies popping up in the pool, you have the house caving in, you have that giant creature in the closet, you have the guy hallucinating that his face is peeling off. There is so much in Poltergeist, and it's awesome. It is, like I said, it's a tour de force of just iconography, of visuals, of sound design, of characters, of subtext. I love that if you want to just turn your brain off and enjoy a popcorn horror flick, you can do that. And you can pretty much do it with the whole family. That's the type of horror movie this is. But if you want more, you want horror that has something to say, you want some subtext, some thematics to break down, this movie does not have a lot of kind things to say for the realities of living in Reagan's America. So the next time you watch this movie, really look for that. Search for those breadcrumbs because they are there and they're actually pretty intriguing. They're actually pretty interesting. And I love that this movie has just that little extra dynamic to it. But like I was saying, the characters in this movie, this family, you root for them, you love them, and they are up against it. This movie, it has been often imitated but never duplicated. I would understand if it was your favorite. It's gonna take the runner-up position for me. It's number 2, but it's a damn strong number 2. Number 1, my favorite ghost movie, it's The Shining. And you go ahead and lump in Dr. Sleep right now if you want to. I also love that movie. Just so much love for that movie, but I wanted to have some variety on this list. I don't have 2 movies from the same franchise, if you will. But yeah, I don't know how many people's minds go straight to The Shining when they think of ghost films. You probably get that type of thing. You picture somebody like in The Sheet or An Invisible Force, that type of thing. But when you think about it, The Shining is essentially a haunted house story on a hotel scale. And it binds generations, and we have so many different ghosts, such variety. I mean, this is almost like that SNL skit with Stefan where he talks about the best clubs in New York City. Think about if you were to talk about the Overlook. You'd be like, this place has everything. Massacred twins, angry father figures, supermodels in bathtubs that turn into cackling hags, and that thing where the elevator opens up on itself and has a tidal wave of blood. That's what's going on with The Shining. There's so much offered up in Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of the Stephen King work. And I know Stephen King hates this movie and he feels like it was a disservice to his novel, but I've read that novel. I love that novel. It might actually be my favorite book. It was a real a page turner, but I gotta say, the things that were not included in the movie, I think that ultimately they shouldn't have been included. Things like a topiary coming to life, seeing a line that's made out of like a bush that has been trimmed. I don't think it would have worked well in 1980. I think it would have been a little bit goofy. And some of the other elements that weren't included, I think for good reason. And ultimately, a lot of the decision and the craftsmanship of Kubrick in here, it is, it stood the test of time, and it's garnered a legion of fans, and that legion of fans has had children who've gone on to create an even bigger part of fandom. So what more can you really say about this movie that hasn't been said? I mean, there's a documentary, for goodness sakes, called Room 237, in which they attempt to break this movie down, and it's very many conspiracy theories about the thematics of this movie and what Stanley Kubrick may have been trying to tell us, the viewing audience. I mean, they range from plausible to stuff about the moon landing to stuff about centaurs, stuff about Native Americans. There's so much in there. And so if you love this movie and you haven't seen that documentary, you should probably go check that out. That probably has a lot of fun food for thought for you. There's so much in this movie, so many different types of ghosts, so many different types of haunting. The score is tremendous and powerful and huge, and it looms over you like the dreadful tension of this slow burn of a horror pic. I love The Shining. It's my favorite ghost movie of all time. Dr. Sleep is also a very strong ghost movie entry. Check out Dr. Sleep if you love The Shining and have been dragging your feet. I promise that it does it right, and it is a faithful send-up, and you will love where it takes the story of the Torrances from where we last saw them. So anyway, that is my list. Those are my top 10 ghost movies of all time. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me see what your list is. Maybe give me some recommendations for movies that I have not seen yet. And I got one more thing to ask you. Have yourself a great day. I'm Nate for Natemare Flix, and that's a wrap.